This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 9th of June 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, on whose side are you? CJ Moraga asks Uhuru. In the Standard, faces that speeded up divorce. And in the Star, Uhuru was to pick judges next week before CJ attack.
Yes.
So let us begin with the Daily Nation.
Yes.
Some will call it tyranny. Others will say Uhuru Kenyatta is revisiting after his election was nullified. One of three in the world, I think, that had ever been nullified at that point. What is happening?
This was an unwarranted attack by the CJ because Uhuru Kenyatta did not do anything to the judiciary. In fact, as we are told, he probably was going to name judges to swear in judges next week. But I want to also say this. You see, yesterday, let me just give some context. Yesterday, CJ Moraga, without the other Supreme Court judges and members of the JSC, decided to attack the president. And the only person who was next, the only creature that was next to him was a cat.
And even the cat wasn't impressed.
Even the cat was not impressed. And he attacked the president. He said the president is in violation of the constitution because he does not follow court orders. And I was like, wow.
But is the CJ without a point? You've understaffed his court. You've reduced his budget. He's frustrated. He's been seeking audience with the president. What was he to do? Let
me tell you, this Katiba is mbichi, as Prof would like to call it, because the president in the appointment of judges is just but a conveyor belt, right? He waits for the approval and nomination of a JSC and then swears in these judges. Now, if he got intelligence that says that these judges were tainted,
that there was something,
of course he would have to have his word there.
And I think the truth is things were bad with the judiciary before this moment. So is all the blame to go to the president all of a sudden?
No, I don't think so.
I think Moraga also has some responsibility to take.
Yeah, and I'm really wondering if the Star headline, Uhuru was to pick judges next week before CJ attack, it seems like it would be an embarrassing headline for Moraga because
all he had to do was wait.
All he had to do was wait. Just be patient, really.
They say patience is a virtue.
Is a virtue. He should know that, right? However, I think that Moraga has two trump cards and he knows it. The first is the 2/3 gender rule that would allow him to potentially dissolve parliament. And the second is the fact that he's an overly strong chief justice. Because his term is about to expire when he turns 70 in January, he knows that he can do whatever he wants. He can be quite brash, he can be quite aggressive, he can toe the line, knowing that in this last 6 months he can do whatever he pleases. But just going back to the 2/3 gender rule, we know that under the Constitution it tells us that in Chapter 18, those transitional and consequential provisions, that if they were not passed within their time limit, and I think for the 2/3 gender rule it was a 3-year time limit, that the CJ shall advise the president to dissolve parliament, and the president shall dissolve parliament. So that takes us to our second conundrum, because section 137 of the Constitution tells us that the election for the National Assembly and the president are to occur on the exact same day. So does that then mean that when Moraga dissolves parliament, he's at the same time dissolving the presidency of President Kenyatta?
I actually believe here there's more than one player. Ask yourself, cui bono, who would benefit from the dissolution of parliament? Or rather, let's put it differently. Is the dissolution of parliament a means to an end?
Is he from Sugoi?
Oh.
I was going there. You see, dissolution of parliament means this. He would need to then make a constitutional reading that parliament reconstitute itself. The only way for that to happen is an election. Now, if the life of parliament and that of the executive runs side by side, then it means the president will also
lose
his seat, because let's not really lose his seat. There will be a presidential election. What has happened until now? You see, the Constitution also says that 2.5 years before a general election, and if something happens to the president, then his deputy will not be deemed to have done a full term. What it means is, should we go into a presidential election, someone can go to court and argue that President Kenyatta has done 2 terms.
Wow. And therefore, the dissolution would be the end of his presidency.
Yes. The dissolution would also signal the end of his presidency.
And this is scary. We've seen the CJ, Moraga, as being a legal positivist. He really obeys the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. And if he could nullify an election, and if he has 6 months to go, this could be his next sort of trump card.
I feel like he's a person looking for legacy, right?
I know,
it's almost like he's pandering to the West, you know, the first African Chief Justice to have annulled an election. Then he'll be the first to, follow the letter of the law to that.
But what is the greater good? And I think that's what he has to put forward. What is the greater good for Kenya?
Moraga here is not a person we should be watching. Moraga has an owner.
And you think the owner is?
The owner have a hypothetical position.
Yes.
The person who will benefit from this situation is not Moraga. Moraga has 6 months to go.
So I asked you if the man who is behind this is a man from Sugoi. Why are you
Yes, it's a man from Sugoi.
Well, we have one last headline to analyze, and that is coming from the Standard. And the Standard is talking about faces that speeded up divorce.
Does that sound
sped up or speeded up?
I looked into it. Apparently, you can say both, but the preferred use is to say sped up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, the article is outlining the people that fast-tracked the end of the Jubilee marriage, and there are people on 2 sides. You have Tanga squad, and you have Uhuru's side. On Uhuru's side, the main catalysts are Raila, Tuju, Morave, Atwoli, Nancy Getao, amongst others. And then the supporting cast is Karanja Kibicho, Maina Kamanda, Gonjiri Wamburu. And then on DP side, you have the usuals: Alice Wahame, Kimani Gonjiri, Kipchumba Murkomen, Kindiki. Basically, they're not telling us anything.
Yes.
They've just told us a list of the people who are falling on either side of the divide.
Just,
They've also said that when it comes to this war, it seems like DP side has come out on top. They've come out on top apparently because of Twitter warriors. But if anyone has been in the social media space right now, you can see that both sides are putting up a good fight. And that was it.
Yeah.
I feel like we should toss it.
Yeah, honestly, it just sounds like it's roll call for each side.
Exactly.
It's quite boring.
Not insightful.
No.
But so it's between the Daily Nation and the Star. We have on whose side are you? CJ Moraga asks Uhuru. And we have Uhuru was to pick judges next week before CJ attacked.
I would go with the Star.
I would go with the Star as well.
I go with the Star because actually they're telling us that this could have all been avoided.
Yes.
Yeah, and that is why this man is up to something.
All right, so we'll leave it with the Star. I'm going to toss the other two onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a few part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? Is it effective or just plain lazy?
Yes.
Now, you have this is Ndula of Daily Nation, CJ Moraga, and he's doing a phone call to Uhuru Kenyatta. And he's saying, hello, this is the CJ. But Uhuru's here. There's someone on the other side of the call and is listening. This is BBI. See, let me tell you, this is this cartoon is telling us that Uhuru has bigger priorities than listening to the CJ.
So where his intentions lie?
His priority is to focus on BBI. You see, the ear is even bigger. It looks like mine.
But does the executive not need the judiciary? Should anything happen with this referendum story? Should they need an interpretation? Should they need all these things? Don't you need the judiciary?
Good question.
Should you fight it, and is it wise?
Should the CJ fight it? I find it very... I don't know whether it's untaught. There's a time on Fifth Estate we said sometimes he behaves like a man who works in the village with a job in Nairobi. See, I think some of the attacks are unnecessary. They are totally uncalled for. You do not attack the head of government like that. He was so on the ground.
Based on what we've said today, I think it would be wise for the president to just use that age-old tactic. You keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Because this guy has a trump card that he can use at any point, and based on what you've said, it may be the end of his presidency.
Let me tell you,
so I think he does need to focus a little bit of attention to him.
Let me tell you, Tujay, when the CJ signs that thing, let's assume he dissolves parliament today. How will that order look like? If you take a picture of it, will he go to the gates of State House and give it to him?
Did we not say it would be an SMS?
Whether it's an SMS, but
or a WhatsApp.
But it had to be declared received.
Okay, guys, can we move to the next cartoon?
Keep it moving.
Because we have the Standard.
Yes. In the Standard.
In the Standard, you have the White House, drawing of the White House, and down there is these are chicken, correct?
Yeah, but there's a person there saying, "Quick, Mr. President, hide in the bunker. The chickens are coming home to roost."
And the chickens are called BLM,
Black Lives
racism,
Matter.
police brutality, bigotry, hate. Yeah, so the context here, it's quite late.
Yeah.
Last week there was some protests taking place outside of the White House.
Yes.
And what is heard is that the president and his wife were then taken down into like the panic room bunker.
Yeah.
But then the president claims that he was never there, or that if he was, he'd only been there 2.5 times.
Yeah.
He said the half time he just stepped in
No, me, I like
and then
Trump.
left.
Yeah, deny.
I like Trump. I like Trump.
Can we move very quickly?
Move on.
to
It's an old story.
To
Absolutely.
the Star, we have 3 branches. One is called judiciary, the other is called the executive, and the other is called the legislature. And the legislature looks like it's been cut down to size, or it's about to fall off.
Yeah.
And there, I guess, it's just speaking to what's happening, because Moraga is there nudging Uhuru Kenyatta, who is sitting on the executive branch, saying, "Psst, you had 41 judges to appoint.
Give me attention.
Yeah, can you do something about it?"
Yeah.
And I think it's just speaking to the 3 branches of government. They're supposed to check each other. It's a system of checks and balances.
Yeah. So Ozone has used this cartoon quite a few times before.
Yeah.
And what I suspect, I'm not entirely sure, we'll check, that each time he's drawn this picture, the legislature branch he's been chopping it off, every time
More
he
and
does a
more.
cartoon, more
Yeah.
and more.
Okay,
So I think maybe the next cartoon will be the legislature does not exist anymore.
Exist.
I don't know. What is Ozone telling us?
Interesting. So who do we give our winning cartoon?
If the progression of this cartoon is true,
Then it makes sense.
I would give it to Ozone.
I'd give it to Ozone.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's give Ozone.
Let 2J give it, because she
Okay.
doesn't like Ozone.
My best friend, Ozone, you have today's winning cartoon.
There you have it. And what is our final thought?
Now, our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Information, a History, a Theory, a Flood, by James Blake.
James Blake.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
He's an expert in science writing and is the author of numerous and successful books. So in this book, he shows how information has become the modern era's defining quality. And he looks at the history of humanity through the lens of our attempts to make communication faster, more efficient, and more available. And he also looks at how computers and the internet have changed the way in which people interact and approach the collection and understanding of information. So we all know that writing was the first step in allowing civilization to record and maintain information, as well as being able to transmit it. And as basic as information actually is, it also proves to be this very elusive concept. And the author says that in part it's because it can encompass so much. And he says arguably everything can be considered information. Sounds, codes, words, biology, so many different things.
Right.
So to grasp what information actually means, he has to embrace linguistics, logic, telecommunications, codes, computing, mathematics, philosophy, cosmology, quantum genetics, and just all these incredible things to kind of break down what information actually is. And he explains in this book that one consequence of this immense volume of information that we have is the importance and methods behind filtering and searching exactly what we want to know. Because we're presented with so much, how do you find exactly what you want? Because information can be misused against us. And so as I was reading this book, it reminded me of a story where in the early 1800s, Napoleon had built this huge data network that went through France, Italy, and Spain. And the use of it was to speed up the transmission of security intelligence. And it was based on what we all know as the telegraph. And so this telegraph system used mechanical arms on towers, and they looked a bit like windmills. So every time we would move in a different direction, it would indicate a different letter or a different word. And so in 1834, this system was hacked by 2 brothers who were thieves because they wanted to steal financial market information.
Love it.
So what would happen is that Paris had become this center for the trading stock market. And the secondary market, cities outside of Paris, would receive the information a few days after. So they were not able to benefit from the financial system. And so what would happen is if traders could get the information more quickly, they could act before the market had time to show it, or other places had time to receive the information. So these brothers decided to bribe a telegraph operator in a city outside of Paris. And they said that he would receive the information from somebody inside Paris. And the telegraph operator's job was to transmit the information to Bordeaux, which is a bit further outside, using this telegraph system. And these codes were appeared to look like mistakes, so that nobody could tell that they were actually sharing information.
It's fantastic.
So this scam went undetected for 2 whole years.
Yeah.
And it was only exposed, unfortunately, when this crooked telegraph operator became sick. So he asked his friend, please can you sit in for me while I go have my off day? And his friend said, sure. But then his friend had a clear conscience, and when he found out what was happening, he reported it to the authorities. But then the story takes another spin.
Yeah.
The brothers, yes, were arrested, but because there was no law regarding, the use of this kind of fraud, they were eventually released.
Wow.
But for the author, I think what it tied in for me was how this modern flow of information, what it has created. We have this huge glut of information at all times. Everything is being saved somewhere. Things are being used against you, and you can't always tell what is true and what is false.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the end of the book, the author is quite optimistic that eventually we're going to find new ways to search and filter information because information is so important. We have to also learn how to control it ourselves.
Yeah, fantastic.
So brilliant. Now, he's the chapter that, and this thing made me really think about our context as Kenyans. But before I go there, let me tell you this about this chapter. The chapter was drums that talk. So when a code is not a code. So he speaks of a captain in the 1800s. His name was Captain William Allen. And the guy was on an expedition with a Cameroonian guy he called Glasgow. And they were going through the river Niger with their boat, whatever they were using then. And this Glasgow person, he takes some attentive, he becomes suddenly attentive. The guy could hear some drums from afar. And William asks, what is this? What is wrong with you? He says, and he asks, hear my son speak? And William asks, how do you know? Your son is not here. How can you tell your son is here? And he says, drum speak to me. They tell me, come up deck. Now, that was a confirmation by Glasgow that the drums that he could hear, he could literally, decipher the message that was there, and that's how the concept of the talking drum came about. Now he says that African cultures were perceived then to be very archaic and very savage by the Modogo, by the Mzungu, but at the same time, the Mzungu actually acknowledged that Africans had the fastest way of sending messages
over long distances.
And this was better than sending the fastest horses, for example, or the fastest runners, for example. And he says that even Julius Caesar himself, when he sent a messenger to go to another city to tell others that he's coming, he would get there before his messenger. and the African was so advanced. But let me tell you why this thing spoke to me. Have you ever guys thought to yourselves, why are Africans huge uptakers of Jamaican music?
Of reggae?
Of reggae music, of dancehall music. There must be something about that beat. And a beat is a drum. There must be something about that beat that signals or hits our genetic coding much better than it hits someone else.
But 2M, you know the answer. It's because nobody can stop reggae. That's the answer.
Or you don't have to dread to be Rasta. So in the final chapter of his book, he speaks of information overload. And I think all of us can relate to having too much information in our lives. So with the advent of the internet, with YouTube, with iTunes, with all these things, you have access to a lot more music, art, pictures, everything than ever before. But he says information overload was not new to us. From as early as 1621, there was an Oxford scholar called Robert Burton who complained that in the wake of the printing press, there was simply too much news and literature to keep up with. And so Blake goes on to say, as the printing press, the telegraph, the typewriter, the telephone, the radio, the computer and the internet prospered, each in its turn, people said, as if for the first time, that a burden had been placed on human communication. New complexity, new detachment, and a frightening new excess. Now he says there's 2 ways to deal with this new excess, this information overload. And the 2 strategies are very simple. It's called filter and it's called search. And this strategy for coping is the basis of some of the most successful information businesses. So for instance, if you think of Wikipedia, it combines the 2. It has a powerful search aspect, mainly driven by Google, and it has a vast collaborative filter when you're trying to filter what is true and what is not. Now the problem with Wikipedia is the same way 2J can edit her Wikipedia page to say certain things. It's the same way I can then go and say no, 2J has not done any of those things, and I can edit it back. So that one is still a work in progress. But he goes also to show us information overload from as early as 16th century when he says, we used to to have files and drawers and you would just put papers in there. And he says that once a piece of information is filed, it is statistically unlikely to ever be seen again by human eyes.
Yes.
And so with the advent of technology, we're finding a way to sort through all this information.
Right.
And so he says these mechanisms of search engines in cyberspace is like finding a needle in a haystack. And so we've learned that it's not enough for information to just exist. We must find a way to search and to filter it. And then he goes on to give this clever analogy that new information technologies are like being in a marketplace. So you essentially have a balance between the creators and the consumers. And every time there's a new technology, this balance is upset, where you can have lots of writers, readers, speakers, and not enough listeners, or vice versa. Now he says of a guy who was a German playwright named Bertolt Brecht, and he was said, when radio first came out, he said, a man who has something to say and finds no listeners is bad off. Even worse off are listeners who can't find anyone with something to say to them. So to all you new Twitterers and bloggers and whatnot, which is worse, too many mouths or too many ears? Right?
I don't know.
Food for thought there. Food for thought. So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Star and a winning cartoon from the Star as well. Thank you for trusting. I want to leave you with this. Gleich teaches us that when information is cheap, attention becomes expensive. But he also points out that information is not knowledge and knowledge is not wisdom. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Shivers.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hopefully you'll find some knowledge, some wisdom, some information somewhere along the line. But also find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Free to Air, and Star Times. Have a lovely evening.